Hello and welcome back to Mood India, California Arts Association's presentation of Indian performing arts. I'm your host, Arvind Kansal. Continuing our series on Indian musical instruments, today we bring you the second part of Bansuri, the Indian bamboo flute. In the studio we have Prasad Bhandarkar, an accomplished Bansuri player from San Francisco Bay Area, and Sudarshan Siddhaye, who will be accompanying him on Tabla. Prasad has learned initially Bansuri from Sri Anantrao Patwardhan and later on from the world-renowned maestro Pandit Hariprasad Chaurasia. Sudarshan continues to learn Tabla since the last 7 years from Ustad Zakir Hussain. In the first program on Bansuri, Prasad introduced us to the Bansuri, its origins, and its place in Indian classical music. He showed us the Dhrupad and Khayal style of presentation while playing the Bansuri. Today, in the second part, Prasad is going to introduce us to different types of Bansuris, their construction, and the different techniques of playing the Bansuri. He will also talk about how expert artists bring out and portray the human emotion in their performances. Welcome again.
Our pleasure.
So Prasad, can you tell us something about the Bansuri?
Well, Bansuri is an old and simple instrument. The physics of the Bansuri as an instrument is very simple. It is a long hollow tube, and you have that tube blocked at one end, and there's a hole at that end where you would blow into the tube, and then you have fingering holes whereby you would, when you're playing, you would just change the length of the resonating air column and thereby change the notes. The principle is very simple. In fact, in very old days, they used to have Bansuris made out of animal bones. So that's prehistoric days, so to say. Over a period of time, various cultures, various forms evolved, took Bansuri into the next level, and the development of Bansuri continued. So what I'm playing is a Indian Bansuri, which is actually made of bamboo, but I do have some more flutes here, which I'm sure we'll talk about.
Quite an assortment. So what is it that makes Bansuri special? It looks like there's a lot of range of Bansuris that you have. What is it that distinguishes them?
Yes, first of all, the question that people very often ask me is, why do you play so many flutes? And the answer is simple. If you look at this Bansuri and listen to its sound, it has a bass sound. If you take a smaller Bansuri like this, it has the same construction, it has the same 7 or 8 holes and so on, but because the length is small, it tunes to higher notes. So it plays higher chirpy tones, and smaller flutes are very good for folk music because of that chirpiness, whereas larger flutes are good for classical music because you tend to play notes very in an elongated way, and the bass of the sound gives additional effect to it.
I see. So, and looks like there are lots of colors and different materials these Bansuris can be made out of.
Yes, as I said, various forms of Bansuri. I have various forms of them. This is probably the biggest one that I have. A couple of notes lower than the one that I usually play. The longer the Bansuri, the more difficult it is to play because you have to blow in that much more air into it, and also the fingering becomes a little harder. But there are some other Bansuris, like this one is a Nepalese version of the flute. It's actually a wooden flute. Construction-wise, it's the same, but it's a little more decorative.
Quite ornate looking.
Right. This is a flute that I bought in Seattle, actually in Pike Place Market. It's made out of ceramic. As you can see, the construction is essentially the same. 6 holes here and blowing hole, and it's blocked from here.
Right.
The tonal quality of this flute will be completely different from the tonal quality of this. You can, I don't know how much you can make out on.
Oh yes.
So
Yes.
it's very soft and uniform sound. Um you also have the Western flute, which is quite complex in construction. As you can see, you have various keys to close the holes as opposed to just the holes. But the sound of this flute is also completely different because of the metal and the uniformness of the construction. You can probably make that out.
So there's so even though in the Western music there is a lot of use of flute, but that is quite different from bansuri or the Indian bamboo flute as we know it.
Oh, absolutely, and the construction of the Western flute is suitable for Western music because you have the keys. The notes are very discrete and uniform. In the bansuri is suitable for Hindustani music because in Hindustani music the lights and slides become so much more important, and unless you have a way to slide between the notes, it won't sound good in Hindustani music. And because you don't have the keys on the bansuri flute, it's much easier to do that.
So maybe you could show us some techniques for fingering and moving between the notes and the glides, as you said.
Yes, perhaps I can. So, if you start playing this instrument and play some simple scale, like there's a pentatonic scale called Bhupali. Okay. If you start playing like this, it sounds good, but you don't have feelings in it.
Right.
And there are three ways in bansuri that you introduce feelings in your music. One is through fingering, the second is through tonguing, and third is through the sheer lung power. Maybe I can give some examples of
Please.
each. Here's an example of a fingering variation. So these are various techniques that have various terminologies in Hindustani music, like gamak and meend and so on. But you can do some of those with fingering. With blowing, you can break the sound in various ways, like so that's the variation through blowing, and variation through lung power are basically through volume control. You can sharpen or flatten the or reduce or increase the volume, but the trick of the trade is when you try to increase the volume by blowing hard, the pitch tends to go up, so you have to turn the flute around to compensate for that.
Oh, I see.
That's one way of doing it through blowing. The second way is what is known as in Western music is it's called vibrato, which is shaking the note
Right.
through blowing.
So when we talked about portraying or bringing out the human emotion in performance, so perhaps you can give us some example of that?
Sure. What I'm going to play is a form of music which is called tumri. It's in a rag called rag des, and this is another speciality of bansuri music. Not many instrumental music tends to go towards the semi-classical or folk music as well as the bansuri because of its folk origin. So I'm going to play rag des, and it's in a slightly different style. It's tumri style. Okay.
Beautiful. Wow. Beautiful, beautiful. Very, very nice. So in the first part we had talked about Bansuri's place originally in the folk music, and it's only later that it came into the Indian classical music. So could you show us some example of folk music?
Oh, it's very interesting. You'll notice that just by changing some fingering, the sound of Bansuri starts sounding very folkish, as if you will. You'll probably notice. So this is a dhun in Mishra Pahadi Rag. Folk music doesn't usually depend on very rigidly on a rag.
Right, it's much more flexible.
Right.
Wow. concludes our series on Bansuri, the Indian flute. Thank you for joining us. Mood India's programs on Indian performing arts is produced by California Arts Association. We welcome your feedback and suggestions and hope you will join us again. Until then, Namaskar.